everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on will virtual human be inherently better than real human. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Rob Enderle. Professor Rob Enderle, what you want to discuss about today's sessions?
Well, there's a lot of discussion right now about the creation of artificial intelligences and using them to displace human workers. Mm-hmm. And the concept of really what we come down to is we've got a number of things to define. So virtual humans is pretty easy, but you would think, but the virtual humans would mean humans that are created with computer technology, but they could exist as avatars in a computer program or robots in the real world. So you'd have some variety in the virtual humans. But for our purposes, let's just talk about virtual humans as being something that is created through computation. They are a computer construct and not a biological construct. So robots, avatars, or whatever. But we're not talking with virtual humans any type of evolutionary result from the human race. We're talking about something that's constructed. Mm-hmm. And then what's a real human? So that there we run into a little bit more trouble because we really define real human as kind of somebody that's born and grows up, born from humans, grows up and behaves like a human would. In other words, from appearance to biology to how we behave, they fall within certain parameters. But now ask yourself this: is a psychopath human? No empathy, no real consideration for others, standalone and particularly they isolate their decisions within their own mind. I really don't have much care for the outside, except as it affects them. So you could argue a psychopath might be closer to what we would define as a robot, even though it's in a human body, even though he or she are in a human body, and therefore, how broad is the human definition? And then we finally come up with what's better. That's a qualitative determination. And what is a better human? Is a better human one that's more performant? In other words, a human that works longer, harder, never gets sick, is always happy. Well, it doesn't really matter whether they're happy or sad. They're just simply always performant. Now, I'd argue that, well, it's not necessarily better human. That would be how we would define a machine or a robot. And so the better part is much more difficult, or is better someone that's super empathetic, that helps others, that works cooperatively and collaboratively. Is that a better human? And certainly there are aspects of it, but we would have to define what better really was. And one of the problems we've got when trying to create an avatar or a robot or whatever, we'll call it an AI in this case, to create an AI or a virtual human that's better than a real human, is we would have to decide really what better is. And we would probably also have to narrow our definition of what a human is, because if better is more performant and better is less emotional, which often is a definition that we apply to people, then creating a better virtual human wouldn't be very hard at all, because the better virtual human would simply be more robotic, would have less of the things that we attribute humans to, less of the behaviors that we attribute to humans, and the end result is, would it be a better human or just a robot that could appear, or an AI that would appear as a human? Now, we're going to be facing this a lot in the next few years and months. The Unreal folks just announced that they've created virtual human NPCs, and they're going to start introducing them into games. And it's something we've all been looking forward to. So that these are constructs that behave like people, can have conversations like people, interact like people, and certainly look like they're people. And these constructs don't, at least for now, they don't get angry. They can emulate empathy, but for the most part, if you're not going to upset them, that they're going to be 24/7 performant. They'll never die. They'll never age unless you design into it. They'll never age. And so for most standpoints of measurement, as we measure people, they would be better humans, but they won't reproduce. I mean, the way you reproduce wouldn't be through relationships. You just craft a new one in 3 or 4 seconds. So even from the standpoint of being able to replace one that failed, we could replace these virtual humans far faster. So you end up with something that can be extremely performant, 24/7, never gets tired. You end up with something that never gets angry, never gets sad, never has children, never gets sick, totally performant. And when you're all done, though, the question still comes back to: is that a better human or just an AI that can interact with humans, but is optimized on the AI track? In other words, it's the best, most performant robot or automation we can make, but at the end of the day, it isn't human. So what we have to really think through is does better really mean non-human? I mean, depending on how we define it and how we define and select for better, that's kind of the track we're on. As we look at replacing employees with virtual employees and AIs, the reasons for doing it is we can spin them up faster. They never get sick. They work 24/7. They don't form unions. They do what they're told. From the standpoint of a manager, they're the perfect employee, certainly the better employee. But then we still go back to the initial question: are they really a better human? And I'll leave that question open as I pass over to Sheridan, because it's really kind of an interesting discussion in terms of, how do we think we're going to evolve, or how are we going to evolve our creations? Because these virtual humans, in a way, are kind of our digital children. Yeah, we're not conceiving them, but we are building them, and they are built to a certain extent to emulate us. So we do have some responsibility here. Sheridan, you're up.
Okay, so I'm Sheridan Tatsuno. I'm San Francisco. I'm a serial entrepreneur launching several companies in virtual reality and AI. So today I'm going to be talking kind of pragmatically about what we face as startup companies using AI, avatars, and VR. Right now, one is called iMedis. They're German doctors, and we're incorporated in the Netherlands and the United States. We've been using AI avatars since 2017 under GDPR, the very strict rules, more stricter than HIPAA compliance in the US, for personalized medicine. And the way that we do it is that we're mobile first. We have an avatar named Ava. She's a woman, and she's like the front desk who welcomes you to a hospital, because we work with hospitals who have maybe 20 to 50 to 100,000 patients, and it's very difficult for them to track everything. It's very bureaucratic, very time consuming. You have to sometimes wait 3 to 4 weeks, and so it's really expensive and bureaucratic in Germany, for example. So what the doctors did is they said we can make it better and faster and cheaper using AI, and here's why. 80% of the patients don't have to come to the hospital usually just to get the meds updated or check up. So right off the bat, you save them huge amounts of time and headaches. So what we do is we use telehealth. So you go in there, and then the avatar comes in, and you say, now you could do 2 types of searches. One is without humans. We always keep the human in the loop. And you could ask any question, so like a Google search or Bing search, and you say, I feel bad, what about this? And then, now remember, the system has all of your health data protected under GDPR. And based on your personalized profile, it records everything you're saying, everything you've ever said. And so your personalized medical database, and we use that search to be able to tailor the search. So for example, I have a headache. Well, we know that you've had headaches and you've taken these meds and blah, blah, blah. Have you tried this or have you tried that? So it's kind of a diagnostic tool. Now, that's good, but as we know, you can have false positives or false negatives. In other words, misdiagnosis, which is dangerous in health. It's a medical liability and a financial liability. So we always keep the doctor in the loop. Always. We can never. So really, we use AI for a human assistance, not replacing humans. And I frankly don't think you'll ever see AI totally replacing doctors. And the reason is, it's not can you do it or not. The problem is you may make one false negative thing. It's a legal liability, and the patient dies, and then you got a massive lawsuit. And, and these lawsuits can go anywhere, 20, 30, 40 million dollars. So most smart doctors under HIPAA compliance and hospitals know better that, there's too much risk. So rather than take the human out of the loop when you have a really difficult case. We have telehealth, and then the doctor gets involved and they start asking questions, and then we do like a triage: red, yellow, blue, green. If it's red, the ambulance is on the way. Second, yellow means it's kind of iffy, based on the AI pre-diagnostics, and then the doctor says you should probably come in. And then what they do is they just make an appointment on the phone. It's really easy, just like this, and it has your when the doctor's available. You pick the open time, click button, done. So it's not back and forth for 2 weeks. So it's just easier, faster, and cheaper than trying to do ping pong phone calls and email. So we do that, and then you go to the doctor, and then they do the search, and then all that data is in the system. So when you want to, so one of the things we've learned is that AI it doesn't replace the human in medicine. It assists the doctors with pre-diagnosis and just common sense and tips, and then booking and just all the administrative stuff that overwhelms hospitals. Now we work through the hospital because we don't do B2C, direct to clients, because there's no regulations. And also in that sense, we go through the hospital, so they have we have HIPAA and compliance officers there to make sure everything's compliant with the law. And then you go through, and then it basically provides services for the hospital. So that's kind of the way that we use it. And now that's a glutted space. As you know, telehealth is really a crowded space now. Many companies have been using AI for like 5 to 7 years around the world already. It's not new. I think what Rob was talking about is sentience. It's like actually replacing human being, but we're not even close to that in medicine. I can tell you that, for legal reasons primarily, and liability reasons. Now, when so instead of trying to create sentient humans and replacing doctors, we're not going to go there. We're actually extending doctors. We're going using virtual reality. So we just created the first virtual hospitals in Dubai, because Dubai is really pushing VR. They're going into 3D medicine now, personalized medicine and everything. And Dubai, Australia is leading now, and Tokyo University. The U.S. is a bit behind because we have a lot of HIPAA compliance. People are kind of stuck in, I call it the 2D AI world right now, and they're not yet in VR. What happened is that when the metaverse crashed a couple of years ago, it took everything with it, and so people, except in enterprise, stopped using it. In other words, because the consumer market never developed, everybody just threw it in metaverse. But they don't know that we've been using virtual reality for like 3 or 4 years in medicine for surgery training, things like that. And in, of course, construction, they've been using it for 5 years. It's mainstream in enterprise. Now, how does AI, and this is a tricky part now, and this gets difficult because now we're merging with Rob's sentience, with real people, with virtual people, VR and AR. So what I'm doing is we're doing blended reality. So we use AR for the doctor there with the patients, training real like students in the room using AR overlays. And then people around the world could watch that like television, but they can't interact because we can only, and then we have some people who are virtually there. You can see their avatars there, plus the real people there, and they can interact. So you have the real people and the virtual people projected there, plus the people in the room, the students in the room. So we can do that. And so we're going to be doing medical training. And I think that would be very useful because you can offer a class to 1 million people around the world, just like watching television, like sports. So you can watch the doctor operating. And we have the first doctor, Dr. Shafi Ahmed, who did the first virtuality training. He trained in VR for surgery, and you can have the digital dummy, and you can run simulations of disasters. And then when he's in operating for real, then he takes that virtual picture, overlays it over the real person because they've already practiced. They could see inside the real person because we CAT scans. So in the virtual dummy, the advantage is you could see inside and open her up and look around before you go in. Whereas when you're a real patient, you can't do that because it's a real person. So we do overlays. So even during surgery, the doctor can see inside the patient on the virtual dummy next to the real person. And then they start cutting open, and then we do that. But again, that's all human is in the loop. We don't take them out. And AI, the good part now, AI is going to be what I call biomarkers. So when you're opening surgery, okay, you could like take organs and lung, and then they could say, you can't do this. To AI is going to be the game changer. You'd say, wait a minute, this looks similar to another case we had. Well, we could do a search if we have it in a database. It'll say 4,200 cases exactly like this. Here's the treatment statistically. Here are the results statistically. And then you could pull up the doctors virtually and say, okay, let's discuss it. These cases are similar. Do you think we could try that? And then you all discuss what treatment, what therapy, or whatever to do on the patient. But AI, you couldn't do it without AI because you couldn't find the cases fast enough. Whereas AI could immediately pull up in. And then what we could do is biomarkers, which is on the body. You could put a marker and it says, click on here, and it pulls up all the data for any case that's even similar to this one. So that's why AI is going to totally revolutionize VR.
Thank you, Mr. Donald.
I'm sorry I didn't get to hear what Rob said. Is this what I'm mistaken. I don't know what the show is about today. Sorry.
It's will virtual humans be inherently better than real humans? And all I really talked about was kind of defining the underlying terms and what we might consider to be better.
Well, that's good, because it sounded to me like Sheridan was talking about virtual and blended reality, which is a very interesting topic. And I don't know anybody that knows more about it than Sheridan.
Right.
But
it was
a different topic, so I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I would like to come on to this to point out that the hype about AI is just absolutely unbelievable right now. And so the idea that anything that we're doing in AI has any resemblance whatsoever to humans is incorrect. And one of the things that I just saw is that they're saying, well, GTP-40 is achieved artificial general intelligence, and it's on the way to being as intelligent as a human. And we have to be really, really careful because, now that these things have, achieved their own will and goals and things like that, they're about to go, they're about to be so much smarter than we are that they're going to control the world and stuff. And that's been a science fiction theme for quite a while. And at the same time, I read an article where they were saying about how they're using AI in drones, and it's actually working. And they're thinking that they're going to get to the point where they might make the drones be able to work together as well as insects. But maybe, yeah. I mean, what insects do is pretty darn sophisticated, and we don't. I know some of the people that research it, like Duncan Watts, who wrote a paper about how Circadia managed to coordinate their songs so that the chirping, they all chirp at the same time, and it gets incredibly loud. And so people are working and trying to figure out how they coordinate it. The same article said as smart as insects or birds, and no way. I mean, birds cooperate with each other. They can do multi-step processes. They can use tools. They can solve problems. There is no way that our best artificial intelligence is anywhere close to being as smart as a bird. So anyway, I want to point that out so that kind of a reality check is that there's no. I just read a book called 7.5 Lessons on the Brain by a neuroscientist who I've read an earlier book that she wrote, which is called How Emotions Are Made, and a point that she made that I think is really worth thinking about when you think about artificial intelligence is that human brains, what they're for is coordinating our body, basically coordinating our body. It's basically there for keeping us alive. That's what they're for, to try and keep us alive and potentially reproduce. And one of the things that they do while they're doing that is that they're coordinating inside of our body how big our blood vessels is, how fast our heart is beating, what our blood pressure is, what our flow of our kidneys are. I mean, just countless, hundreds of thousands of millions of different things that are going on inside of our body is all being taken care of by our brain. And what our brain is trying to do is to do what it does is effectively using the most energy as possible. So because we might need the energy later. So our body's trying to figure out how, our brain is trying to figure out how to coordinate our body in a way so that we use the least amount of energy to do what it is that we're doing. And the reason I really want to make that point is that why would a computer or a artificial intelligence or software have a purpose? And how could we organize things so that we'd have the relationship between the sense data and the purpose of what it is that the artificial intelligent thing is trying to do, and be able to teach it and train it in a way so that all these millions of processes that are constantly going on are all completely taken care of. I mean, it's a waste. We don't need to do that. I mean, the computer, they need new power. You just build a new data center. I mean, it's not like there's anything about them that is trying to preserve their own life. And that's what, and we mistake intelligence. We look at what people do, or computers do, or whatever, and we just assign the idea that there's intelligence to it. But it's not necessarily an adaptive thing. It's allowed human beings to thrive in a lot of niches that other creatures can't thrive in. But on the other hand, we're killing ourselves, and we're on the road to self-destruction at this point. Hopefully, we'll figure out what to do. But right now, it's a little dicey. So the point of the matter is comparing artificial intelligence to human intelligence just isn't a reasonable comparison. There's no real comparison. So I'm just going to end it with that. I'll talk more later if I get time, but there really is the overall question that you're asking isn't a real question, because there's absolutely no comparison. It's like you're comparing aardvarks and football games or something.
Thank you, Mr. Rob.
Yeah. So the question is will virtual humans be inherently better than real humans? And I'm saying will, not are they today. Don would be right. If we're talking today, we're not yet at parity. But as Sheridan pointed out, we are already using virtual humans in a variety of roles, and they're performant. The Sheridan's examples with regard to using artificial humans as entry points into healthcare, they are outperforming the people that they're replacing. IBM did a test, it was 3 years ago, where for an insurance company, they replaced the telephone sales reps by Watson elements, and they were 80% more performant. Customers were more satisfied, and several of the AIs were asked out on dates. They were so believable, and that was 3 years ago. And if you look at the scale of performance back in 2022, the capabilities of AIs and humans were massively different. The last charts I got were at parity. In terms of being able to perform complex tasks, identify that using the typical tests we have. Perform complex tasks, being able to identify images, they're at parity. Being able to solve problems, parity. As long as they have the information on the problems, which is the same with a human. If you know what you're doing, then you can fix the problem. If you don't, you can't. Same thing with an AI. If they're not trained for it, then yeah, not so much. But the same with a human. And so on almost every metric, AIs are now capable of stepping in and doing a variety of tasks equal to humans. But does that make them truly virtual humans, or does that simply make them robots that are heavily skilled? And that's the interesting, at least to me, that's the interesting question, because it still goes back to what's better. If you had an employee that worked 24/7, and like Sheridan's example, and people like working with it, so their customer satisfaction scores were high, or like my example with Watson, their sales performance was higher. In those metrics, which is how we would measure an employee, they're better, and they're better now. And what's troubling is the rate of improvement at the moment is vertical. So as I mentioned, 2022 not performant at all, really not even competitive. Now, at least on paper, they're equal. That's 2 years to go from not competitive to fully competitive. Okay, let's advance 10 years into the future. Where are we? We've got Jensen Huang arguing that we're going to be. Right now he's arguing there's no point in going into coding, because right now AIs can outcode you. And Devon, which is the first AI employee, is on the market. Went on the market back in March. And from what my understanding, it's performant, unlike Baxter, which was the previous attempt to replace assembly line workers at 20 grand a pop. It failed because it wasn't. It could do the job. People were cheaper, and that in itself is troubling. You create a robot, and you try to replace people with the robot, and your conclusion isn't that the people. I mean, in this case, the people are competing with the robot, not the other way around. And the only reason the people are winning is because they're cheaper than a robot. That to me is just not even remotely sustainable, because you can certainly drop the robot's price a lot easier. You're going to be able to drop the people's price because they still need to eat. So it probably says more about underpaying assembly line workers than it talks about the capability of the AI, the robot. And that was I think Baxter failed back in 2019, 2020, and the market's come along quite a way since then. With regard to drones and drone swarms, I think Don brought that up. Israel has been using them in the war in Hamas. We've got, and they're actively to identify targets, and they've deployed a flying drone with an automatic weapon on it. The trigger pull is still involving a human, thank heavens, at this point. But we're advancing on the drone side a lot. Drone swarms are already being modeled by the DoD as both offensively and defensively. And creating the model that Don brought up, where you're using bees, that was the programming model that they created. But Intel's been showcasing drone swarms, I think as early as 2007. Granted, computer controlled and generally with an operator back then. But Israel's well advanced in terms of using automated drone swarms, and now we've got the Lockheed program for automated fighter jets. Initially flying in formation with real pilots, but they just started testing with these drones with other drones. So no human pilots up in the air at all. And we've certainly seen in Ukraine, they've already deployed drones that self-select targets and act autonomously. And a lot of the reasons for the autonomous actions of these weapon systems is because when it comes to, and it's funny, I read a science fiction story years ago on this. But the same problem is if you're remote controlling the technology, those signals can be blocked, and so you lose control of the drone. And we've had a number of drones go down because the signals have been intercepted, and they've lost control, and they've gone into glide down mode, and then they get captured, reverse engineered, and then you've got another kind of problem. So now the drones are going in with this autonomy backup. So if they lose connection, they can either return back to base autonomously, or they can self-select targets and off they go. Again, though, the question isn't so much are we there yet, because I would agree with Don. We still have a ways to go. The speed in which we're advancing, though, is unparalleled. Now, in terms of trying to determine whether an AI is at human intelligence levels or not, we used to have the Turing test. And the Turing test was thought to be the definitive test on whether an AI was human capable, and we've had AIs passing the Turing test since 2012. So then we've come up with a number of different tests, and they're kind of interesting just to cover. There's the Marcus test, which I think is the most interesting of the tests. With the Marcus test, you show the computer a bunch of Netflix videos of all things, and then the computer attempts to tell you what the heck the video is about. And so right now we've got AIs that do a really good job of identifying objects. So no issue, they can identify the people, they can do a better job than I can in terms of identifying actors and things in the shot. But they've struggled with actually putting together, okay, what's the overall plot? I mean, what is the video for? What is its purpose? In other words, looking at all the elements and coming up with a whole. And so the Marcus test is self-performant right now. The visual Turing test, this one's now obsolete. The visual Turing test is can the computer look at a bunch of objects and properly identify them, particularly complex objects? Yep, it can do it. We're at parity with the visual Turing test, so we're past that. The Lovelace 2.0 test. This has to do with computers being able to create original ideas. And this is kind of an interesting test because who's to determine whether a human creates original ideas or not? I mean, we've certainly seen with regard to artists, a lot of artists that appear to be creating original work, and then they're sued for copyright infringements. And they may have never even seen the other work, or they may have read the other work as part of something in school that they forgot about, or something just for recreation, or just heard the song, if we're talking about music, on the radio, but never really associated. I mean, it just sat in the back of their head, and they never remembered that they actually got kind of the melody or the wording from somebody else. And in some cases, they've been sued even though they've claimed they'd never even heard the other song or lyrics before. It's just how it came together. And very well, they may have conceived the song or the work or the book or whatever the same way the original author did. In other words, they had similar educations, they read similar books, they listened to similar music, and so when it came to create something, they created something that's similar. But that's exactly what happens with AIs. They're trained on material. That material informs what it is they create, and the difference between the AI and the human is while the human might read, a few thousand books, the AI is trained on a few million. So it should be much harder to make the connection between the AI and the originating work than with the human and the originating work, because there's just less material to check. The human is just covering less material, but Lovelace is still performant. The reverse Turing test. Now, this one's really interesting. This is where you're testing to see if the AI can tell if you're a robot or not, and you make the determination on the AI depending on its accuracy. So this goes back and you interact with the computer, and you're trying to fool it into thinking you're an AI, and it's trying to figure out whether you're telling the truth or not. That actually surprisingly requires a lot of intuition in terms of the underlying behavior, and that test is still performant. The AI classification framework. This is kind of a multiple test evaluation method. This is a framework that's based on the theory that multiple intelligence, which requires human intelligence to satisfy at least 8 different criteria, which include music, rhythm, logic, mathematical. I'm reading this. Music, rhyme, logic, mathematical intelligence, visual identification, emotional intelligence, self-reflective intelligence, existential thinking ability, and body movement. So this really tries to create a framework in which you fully conceive of what a human's capable of doing, and then you test the AI against that framework. And it's the most complex of the testing methods. I'm not sure it's more performant. It is still a viable test. Hasn't been overachieved by the AI to my knowledge yet. But in the end, it adds a lot of things like the robotic aspect that I'm not sure is needed, because we already know that the AIs can move computer arms, can pretty much do everything that we can do physically. So I'm not sure we need to have a physical test in there. And the music rhythm aspect, again, AIs have been creating music for a while. Certainly, I think could determine different music types, reproduce most any music type, and create works that appear to be original. So I'm not too sure that's worth doing anymore either. But the other tests would be performant and informed. But what I want to point out with all of this is the AIs keep overachieving the tests that we create, and so we say, pass this test, and we think you're intelligent, and they pass it. And say, yeah, no, we got another. You're not intelligent. We got another test we want to give you, and they pass that and say, yeah, no, we don't really think you're intelligent. And then we give them another test. And remember, we had this little issue about a year ago when one of the leading data scientists over at Google claimed that Gemini, at least the previous iteration of Gemini was sentient, and this was the lead guy on it. Now a lot of us argued whether he was right or wrong, but we argued whether he was right or wrong. I think he was wrong, like most of my peers do. But the fact of the matter that we had an argument indicated how close we were, and this was some time ago. If you saw Google I/O and you saw their current iteration of Gemini and the AI tools, they are incredibly performant. I mean, at a level where right now I would challenge you in a conversation with Gemini to determine, in fact, it's Gemini. And they did a joke on that on Saturday night. Not Saturday Night, the Daily Show did a joke on that. And I think it was to point that this was where the guys had a conversation with Gemini and with the voice that it has, which is very flirty. And the guys are really excited about it. In fact, you want to see something that's kind of scary, just search on virtual girlfriend and virtual boyfriend and see how many services come up for each. All very performant. And we right now have several people that have made millions of dollars creating virtual images, I mean, basically virtual humans modeled on themselves. And they're making tons of money because they're going out on thousands of dates they're not going out on. The AI is doing that for them. But the question really still comes down to better. As we look at this, what is the goal we're trying to achieve? If we just want to replace people with AIs, well, we're pretty much there in a lot of cases right now, because that's exactly what we're doing. We've spun up fast food restaurants that have no people in them, and they're performing. You could argue that they still need a little bit of work, but they're performant. And the examples that several of us now have given with regard to using AIs to replace people, those are performant. But better, are they truly better the way we would want them to be better? Or are they better the way that we're measured as people, as employees? And this is something that I really think we need to consider, because if all we're trying to do is replace ourselves with machines that work 24/7 and performant, we're going to be able to do that before the end of this decade. And for a variety of jobs, but will it be? It'll be different, certainly. It'll be better on how we measure people, certainly. But will it be better from the standpoint of the human race? And I would argue certainly not. And that's the part we need to wrap our heads around. And I will pass to Sheridan.
That's good. It's great. I love listening to Rob because I don't follow the technology that closely because it changes so fast. It's really like trying to follow 20,000 people at once. I need an AI just to follow the AI trends right now. So I think the future, in fact, I would argue that the World Talent Forum, the future is AI-driven university, which does the diagnostic analysis and all that, which Rob has been trying to distill automatically, and then we could talk about it though, and not spend all the time searching like Google. Anyway, so I want to kind of look historically first, and we had this debate every technology. So we sat around at DataQuest in 1983 saying the PC, IBM PC, and we said, okay, besides word processing and spreadsheets, why do you need a PC? We were banging our head. And one guy said, oh, we put recipes on the kitchen table, and goes, why would I spend like $3,000 for a recipe? I just put a little box. And then, so the conclusion, can you believe this? There is no need for a recipe directory on your kitchen. Therefore, there's no need for a home PC. See how simplistic we were? We were only looking at one crazy idea, dismissed it, and then threw out the baby with the bathwater. So the danger today is that there's going to be all these inane, stupid, useless, worse AI, and then we're going to pick that to diss the whole industry and say everything is useless. And that's what we learned with the PC software. And then, of course, the PC software, boom, exploded, and then we had thousands and thousands of programs, and people made a lot of money. So people who dismissed the kitchen recipe missed out on the ride and didn't make the money. Okay, it was not the skeptics, but the people who actually said, wait a minute, maybe there's something we can use it for. So that's the way you have to view AI. Same thing. There's a lot of garbage out there, but on the other hand, there'll be some amazing breakthroughs, things that we can't even do. Same thing happened in the web. I was at Stanford when the web came out, and I remember we were using code. They said, why would you use internet commercially? And I said, I don't know anything. And so I remember there was a PhD, and I said, shop. We're going to shop. And he said, and then I remember he said to me, we're not going to bastardize the internet so your Aunt Tilly can shop. And I said, wow, you're arrogant. Because trouble with PhDs, they always think high elite people, we're using Unix and only talking to the Pentagon, NASA, and other elite universities. And it was, real men use Unix, and it was really arrogant. And I said, I'm a Mac user. Everybody's going to be whatever they want. And they just looked at me like I was smoking pot. And I said, no. More people are creative than we are in this room, and guarantee me there's going to be. And then, of course, huge explosion in the internet. I mean, it actually the internet today dwarfs even anybody's imagination back then. So I've learned humility. One of the things we forget is that humans are really, really creative, especially when they compete for money and startups. And so you're going to see this enormous explosion. The first tier is the big boys, the billions of dollars. But the platforms are there. So the most innovators don't have to worry about the platforms because they don't have $1 billion. And then why reinvent the wheel? What they're going to do on top of those platforms is it's like the PC or the internet. That's where the real explosion is going to happen. Right now, we're just putting the internet in place, or the PC or Microsoft in place. So that's what we're now. Just looking at a couple of applications that intrigued me, I saw there's a museum using AI avatars, like we do for medicine, but for historical research. So you have like Abraham Lincoln or any historical figure, and then you could sit up to the screen and talk to them and ask them. And what the AI does is what we do now, is it searches the whole internet, everything ever written about Lincoln. And then you ask questions based on the AI's database knowledge about it, it will answer the best it can. And I think that's a really good use case. So it's kind of a living history book, except it's more interesting than a book which is really boring and static. Whereas if you take your history book and you have the avatar there, then you can ask anything, and then you could have debates between different historical figures, like all these great debates and political debates between, let's say, Gandhi and Hitler. What would that look like? Now, that would be fascinating, and they would talk about one topic, let's say. So you could do hypotheticals you can't do today with a history book, because it's one thing I do like about the AI is dynamic and interactive, and it's constantly like self-generating, creating. And right now knowledge is static, like history books, boring, and you can't question it. So I think that's really the value add. Now there was another case back in 2015. I complained. No, I asked this lawyer in downtown San Francisco. I said, in 2015, I said, boy, someday the internet's going to change the world, and it's going to change law and everything. And he goes, what are you talking about? It already changed it. I go, what are you talking? And he said, LexisNexis, which is AI driven back then, is replacing 80% of all of our attorneys in 2015. I said, what do you mean? And then how do you prove that? He goes, well, we used to have very complex cases, the discovery for massive lawsuits. And we used to hire 10 to 15 attorneys because it's very data intensive, pointed all the documents and all that. Today, we just use 2 for double check, backup, and we use the LexisNexis AI, and they do everything for us. And so that's why the hiring was slow at big law firms, because you didn't need to hire all these young lawyers to do all that, like grunt work. And so AI did it. So I said, well, that means we're going to wipe out all jobs. He goes, wrong. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, what's to prevent all these attorneys to use the same machines that we do? In fact, they could probably charge 1/3 the price because they don't have all the overhead, corporate overhead. So what the impact of AI on the legal business already, and nobody's ever studied this. They always talk about hypotheticals. There's a huge database, but all these law firms, small ones, large ones, are created because they could use LexisNexis. And they can compete with the big law firms. And so we're going to see a huge explosion of startups, smaller businesses with 1 or 2 people, 3 people, competing with companies that are 100. So we're going to see a explosion of entrepreneurialism and innovation, startups, and people existing, who just quit big law firms and say, well, I could just do it on my own. Why do I have to work for a big corporation? So that's what I think. It's more like Silicon Valley. Now, there's I saw an article last year. The sci-fi publishers are getting inundated by Gen AI, Chat GPT generated novels, sci-fi novels, and they immediately ban all AI generated. And they say, how do you tell? It goes, simple. We look at it, and we've seen so many novels, we could see they're AI generated because the themes are the same. It's basically like Hollywood sequels or reruns. It's just regurgitated stories. So now they ban all. You have to authenticate that you actually wrote it, and if you know, and then, so they say, how do you prove? They go, well, it's really simple now. We only work with proven authors. We don't take on new people. So actually, it's becoming a drawbridge to prevent new authors from breaking in until they can prove otherwise with something original. And the readers can tell. The readers basically vote whether it's original or not. Because if it looks like a copycat, they'll just toss it. So that's what happened there. And then finally, I just related to KDP, they do the self-publishing for Amazon. They have the question now, it says use AI for text or photos. And that's it. But they're just gathering data right now to see. But I think a lot of people are using it. I use it for the covers because it's just easier. I did a book cover. It took 5 minutes. So, and you can choose whatever you want. So I think the graphics one, and I don't mind paying a royalty. I mean, for example, if I paid, even if it was $5, I wouldn't care. So I think about it. If you had your data in there and they had micropayments and they could figure out using statistics, algorithms, what percent of the royalty should go out. Let's say there's $10 million. You could maybe split it among all authors, but it might be cents per use. On the other hand, that is better than nothing. So I think we're going to see a huge business in micropayments, blockchain-based, where you have authenticated IP and then using AI to figure out, attribution and then payment. But I think that all the finance people will do that without publishers. And so we're seeing now the New York Times Wall Street case. So they're suing people for copying. So I think that whole area is going to be ripe for innovation using AI. It's how to use AI to help pay people and artists micropayments somehow. So and I don't know who's going to do it, but somebody's going to figure it out and make a fortune. I can tell you that because it's a big issue. And in Silicon Valley, the people who make the most money and raise the most money are the ones who do the most difficult things, not the easy things. And this payment issue is a really difficult thing to do. So I can tell you all the top brains in the world are going to be working on it.
Thank you. Mr. Donald. Mr. Donald.
Fun having Sheridan tell stories about the old days. One of my favorite is that I was really on about the internet and about how it was going to be this big deal. And I think this was a little before the web came around. And I said to one friend of mine, I was telling him about it, and he looked me in the eyes and he said, Don, you're a computer geek. You like this kind of stuff. But no manager will ever have a computer on their desk. It will never happen. that was one of the most incorrect prophecies that anyone has ever made. I'm trying to. While we were talking, I went to a journal that I subscribe to, which is the New England Journal of Medicine special thing on artificial intelligence in medicine. And I was just glancing through the titles of the articles for this week or month, and they looked at things like how well ChatGPT works for something that's incredibly huge part of the medical business, which is coding the whatever the ailment is that they're treating in the right kind of codes for insurance companies so that the insurance company will pay the bill or not. I've had doctors want to prescribe me something, but it's off label for what what they're prescribing it for me. It's not its main use. And they can get really creative about finding some subset of what it's used for, and and assigning that particular code. And because they're smart enough to assign the right code, the insurance companies will actually pay for it. But if they'd assigned a different code, they wouldn't. And right now, ChatGTP is abysmal at it. It can't do it at all. So, according to this article that came out in late April in the New England Journal of Medicine. But all of these things are, are wonderful, exciting adjuncts to people. One of the things that I noticed people talk about the Turing test, and they misrepresent the Turing test as being you interacting with a computer and not being able to tell if it's a computer or a human. But that's not the Turing test. The Turing test is a competition where you're interacting with both the human and the computer. And the test is, can you decide which is which? And I haven't seen that actually. I'm sure people have done that, but I haven't seen any results of that being done. Interestingly enough, right now, teachers have in universities and high schools have banned using Grammarly. Now, why is that? I mean, Grammarly's got some sort of artificial intelligence. I mean, it can basically tell you that the sentence might, you tune it up if you wrote the sentence in this particular way, that particular way, but it's not writing your essays for you in any way. Well, the answer is because after you've gone and used Grammarly on your work, then what happens is it gets more difficult to recognize that it was written by a human rather than a computer. But most teachers say, if you don't use Grammarly, I can 100% tell right away whether or not it's human written or AI written. I mean, most teachers can just figure it out right out of the gate. They don't have any problem with it at all. And I don't know if any of you have ever looked at the first page of Finnegan's Wake. Now, I've gotten all the way through the first page of Finnegan's Wake. I've never made it any further, but he writes things phonetically, and so you have to, the only way that you can possibly read it is to guess what phonological system or what system of sounds that he's using, and then sound it out. And if you're lucky and you recognize the accent that he's using, you can make out what he's actually saying. But nothing is spelled anything close to anything in English at all. But yet it's considered one of the finest books of English literature. So the point I'm trying to make is that everything that we get from AI is based on like averages. And what's interesting is that anything, if you want, one of the ways that you can deal with anything is you can put it into categories. So you can talk about people and say they're straight, male, blah, 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 over 50, whatever. You can make all these different kinds of categories. And, but it's very, very difficult to average a lot of categories together and to come up with some sort of a statistical representation that picks people. It's not like just the union or the intersection of the categories. It's that each category has an average, and then you can work with that. And there's trillions of categories in English on the English language large language models that they've been using, or any language, large language models that they're using. And so but the point of the matter is that's what you're getting. You're getting an average of whatever it is that you're training it on. You've got your training data, And so right now, if you train it on to do one thing and then you ask it to do something else, it can't. I mean, they don't have any way, the AI doesn't have a way that we do of basically taking the models that we generate. Like, we don't interact with sense data. We interact with models that we make in our brain that are predictions of what we think our brain thinks that the world around us is like, or it thinks is the best way to represent the world around us for our survival. So when we look out and we see something, it's not that what we see is coming into our eyes and then our brain's processing and then we experience it. So, you're looking at the screen. What's going on is your brain is making hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of models constantly. And it's picking out of those models which one is most likely to be what's actually going on around you. And then sense data comes in, and that sense, it compares it to the model to sense data that's coming in. And based on the sense data that's coming in, it updates the model. So point of the matter is we're interacting with basically a hallucination. So we don't experience the world around us. We hallucinate ourselves. And one of the things computers are still super, super bad at is forming hypotheses, and out of the hypotheses being able to select the best hypothesis. They're okay at selecting the best hypothesis, but they're not good at generating them in the first place. So that, and I want to point out that, ask the question just rhetorically, what's the difference between being creative and being random? If I went in my kitchen and I put a bunch of rubber bands and olive oil and leftover vegetables into a pot and burned it all up, that'd be creative. No one's ever done that before, probably, or very few people have done it on purpose. But what use is it? It's of no use whatsoever. Creativity isn't something something does. Like a machine can't be creative, or no one can be creative unless other people agree that it's creative. It's a social judgment. It's not a thing. So I met this guy once. I have limited vision and can't drive, and so I hired this guy to drive me over to something I was doing at the NASA Ames campus for UC Santa Cruz. And I get to know him, and he tells me, he says, "Well, I'm a musician." And I said, "Oh, do tell. I'd love to hear some of the music that you've made," or something like that. And he says, "Oh, no, I don't share it with anybody. It's my own secret thing." I said, "Oh, yeah, really?" He says, "Yeah, I'm very, very creative." And I'm like, what definition of creativity is there that it's completely in your imagination? It's not. People can say they're creative, but in other words, everything that we do only means anything because it means things to other people. And we're a long, 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 long way. We can get a robot arm that they can, and artificial intelligence and everything can do specific tasks sometimes.
Let me break in for a second. I've got a 10 o'clock meeting I have to run to, so I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you.
Okay, well, thanks. Nice to see you again, Rob.
Take care.
Anyway, so that's really, I think it's really, really worthwhile to, for a lot of reasons, to think a bit about what intelligence is and what human beings are actually doing language isn't a set of language isn't really the set of rules that makes language. It's also it's also got it's situational. It's got a context, and the context is human beings working together for human beings to survive. And it allows us to coordinate our activities more than any other creature alive and because of that we've done, you know, the things that we've done. But artificial language and ChatGPT, no matter how cool and smart they seem, are still just ELIZA, complicated versions of ELIZA. They seem human to us, and because we interpret what they're doing as if it's a human being doing it. Just the same as if our cat does something and mews in a certain kind of way, we interpret it to be telling us something like a human being would be doing. But it's a cat. It's got a brain that's about that big, and that's not what's going on. We anthropomorphize things, and so I think that the most exciting thing is to take like the mistakes that we're making and look at them and see what it teaches us about humans. I mean, from a philosophical direction, but then from the other direction, it's really useful to be realistic about what artificial intelligence is and can do, because as Sheridan said, there's, you know, a huge number of applications for it that haven't happened yet. So anyway, that's.
Thank you, Professor.
There's no comparison between humans and AI yet.
Thank you, Professor Sheridan. What's your closing remarks?
Okay, I guess what I'll just close, because I'm going to leave too. Yeah, I guess what I see is that AI is our new partner. So, for example, we co-evolved with dogs. We co-evolved with cats. We had, you know, other creatures that we coexisted with. And in a sense, AI is like a creature. And I would argue that AI is an assistant right now, primarily, although you can have autonomous, but we're talking about how humans interact. So I'm keeping humans in the link. So basically, AI has many roles as a human. You could be a genie, it could be a search function, it could be a creative aid, it could be a buddy, a butler, a teacher, hired gun, agent. You know, AI could play any role that you want. And so, because it's going to be learning all the time. So it really comes down, if we're going to keep the human in the link, is the human is the prompt. Basically, all the ideas or the goals or whatever, you know, emerge from the human, and then they just ask the AI to do it and execute and do it faster, better, cheaper, not one time. It's kind of a loop, you know, constant iteration. And so humans are going to evolve with AI, just like we evolve with PCs and phones and, you know, televisions and everything else. So I think the difference is, though, it's going to accelerate our learning if we ask questions. If we ask questions and are open to it and use it for all these different roles, we're going to be learning overnight. So, for example, you're going to see 5-year-old kids thinking at the level of a university physics professor within the next decade, easily. They won't know as much, but they'll be asking questions like professors. In other words, it's sort of the emperor wears no clothes problem. They will see that there's a received wisdom that everybody sees this clothes on the emperor, but then the kid's going to say, wait a minute, there's no clothes. And that's the Einstein who says, wait a minute, maybe the world is fixed. Maybe it's relative. Maybe. And so I think that's really the real big use case, is asking questions through prompting, and then being the kid who's like asking, why is that the emperor wearing no clothes? Which is a no-no among most adults. But, you know, I think children are going to unleash it in that sense.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, I want to I want to point out that abductive reasoning, which is basically creating hypotheses and deciding which ones are the best, is something that computers can't do at all. We don't know how to do it. And so that's core to our human ability to ask questions, to ask meaningful questions, because again, the difference between what's random and what's creative is a judgment. I mean, it's social judgment. It's only creative if it affects human beings in a way that is meaningful to them. So as I say, creativity isn't a thing. It's not an entity. It's how we feel about something. It's a judgment. And so when we talk about saying that computers will be able to ask questions and start doing abductive reasoning, it's a great idea to imagine that, okay, so suddenly this leap is going to happen. But we've got a lot of leaps that have been about to happen for my entire lifetime. Fusion, there's lots and lots and lots of leaps that we just haven't quite figured. We know are someday in the future, possibly, but they're, as the joke used to be, it's 10 years in the future, always has been and always will be, right? And so I'm skeptical. I think that you're better off, if you really want to learn about it, is go and try and start figuring out how some of these models are made and what they're doing. Like, for instance, it's a relatively simple model is the model that does your credit card check. When you use your credit card, it goes through an AI thing that says, is this a normal use of the credit card? And so it's fraud detection. I mean, look at how a model like that works, and you can start understanding how these things are actually working. I mean, you start with a simple one, and you start realizing how they work, and it goes back to what I'm saying. We anthropomorphize things. We use the term learning, but it's not anything like human learning. There's some vague relationships to it, so I wouldn't say it's not anything like it, but it's 2% like it or 3% like it or something. But we see computers do something, and we ask ourselves the question, why is it doing it? And the answer to the question is, well, it's because it's the same reason I'd be doing it, because that's what's closest to us. That's what we know, and that's how we understand. But that's not what's happening. And I think it's important for people to understand what is happening, or, in some ways, maybe even just ignore the question. Like, there's a lot of people that are making software where what they do is they use the API for ChatGPT or one of the others, and their app writes prompts. So what you do is you get an app, and all it does is help you write cover letters. So what it does is it questions you, it queries you and says, okay, I need this information, I need this information, I need this information. And after it's collected all the information, it writes the prompt, sends it to ChatGPT, who sends it back, and lo and behold, you have a perfect cover letter without having to know anything about how to write prompts for ChatGPT. And I see tons of programs like that right now. So it's a realistic way that you can use it. But again, it's not thinking, it's not learning, it's not doing any of those things in this, except metaphorically. And try to remember not to trick yourself into thinking that it's actually got any sort of intelligence, because it just doesn't. And that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Professor Sharidan Tatsura, and thank you, Professor Donald, for your continuous support for us. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. See you next week. Thank you. Bye and take care.